Deborah, with her 30 years of being an entrepreneur and creating over 7 companies, knows exactly what it means to accept the mission. When you make that decision, when you accept the mission to become a solopreneur, to take yourself and your talents to market, then you embrace a life of not only unlimited possibilities, but also the unknown. It's an elixir of fear and bravery that only someone who's taken the leap really understands. On our show, Deb digs deep with her guests to highlight what you, the listener, wants to know. The stories, the whys, and the hows to navigate the journey to success. Get ready to hear from some of the most incredible mission takers from Generation Z to Boomers. So sit up, perk up, and get ready to be blown away. Now here is your host, Deborah Drummond.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. I know you are listening. You are the best listening audience ever. And man, are you going to get tuned up on that? You guys know, I don't know how I keep finding words to describe how incredible you are. I always say you're the best podcast audience ever, but I might get in trouble because Ame-Lia, who is our guest today, also has a podcast audience that she thinks is fantastic. And you guys can definitely go on her show and listen to her show. But you're still mine and you're still the best. And you're going to listen. You're going to listen today because we have Ame-Lia, who is a master. Get this. Okay. For sure. First time on Mission Accepted. And if you don't know why you're here, it's because there's something that you need to listen that's going to be shared today. Or you are a crazy entrepreneur. And if you don't know what an entrepreneur is, it means that you don't have enough things to do. Anyway, she is a master facilitator who bridges worldviews. No, she's not in politics. No, she's not in politics, but she certainly could help you if you are. So communication and listening is this woman's party. She is incredible. When I say she's a master facilitator, you are going to be able to hear that for yourselves and tune up what it is that you're doing in your life. And don't we all want to have a little bit more clear, stress-free communication where the room in the, when something's going on in the room or you've got something going on with a friend, a colleague in your life, you want to communicate, but you need to shift your emotions first. I mean, there's so many times where communication is really the power. I know it takes me back to when I was studying with Dr. Light Miller, and one of the most powerful, amazing teachers that I've ever had in holistic health and Ayurveda. And when I was taking my chakra course, first of all, we had to take the whole weekend in silence. So you guys know how fun that was for me, right? So I was in my 20s. I'm like, we're going to what? Can we talk during lunch or something? And so we had to be completely silent. And I remember after the class, she said, you don't know it unless you can teach it, which was her way of saying, I've now just officially made you a teacher. And I was like, oh, can I talk when I teach, But she talked about how, we talk about the heart and hey, it's coming up to that time of year where there's lots of love in the air because there's these great, this great holiday coming up around that. But she talked about the heart a lot because of course we're doing holistic healing and she's like, more than kisses, more than flowers, more than chocolates, more than, diamonds, more than all of that, more than sex, more than intimacy, communication is the expression of the heart. And if you can communicate clearly in your business and in your life, because really, right, in your business and in your life, you're going to just have less stress, and you're not going to be so afraid to express yourself, right? Because you're going to be received with an easier conversation to work with because you have some skills. And so I'm not going to teach you that today. Ame-Lia is going to tell you, first of all, why she decided to take on the mission and become an entrepreneur. And then Ame-Lia, please do share with us some of your gifts on how we can tap into that and what made you decide to go into that. I don't think I remember that being on the course calendar at college, So it's all yours, Ame-Lia. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Deb. Oh my gosh, I love your energy. First of all, it's so great, so uplifting. And I can, I just love that I get to speak with your crowd because I know they're dedicated and so jazzed about what you're offering. So thanks for having me here. What got me into entrepreneurship was really pain of being in a job that was sucking the soul out of my life. And I was quoted about 10 years before this saying, I will never be an entrepreneur because I looked at the person I worked with at the time and I was like, I don't want their life. Like, look how much they're working. Like, no thanks. I want to clock in, clock out, go home, do the thing. And then eventually I was doing that, clocking in, clocking out, going home, and I was dying inside. I just knew that I was meant for something different. I was not giving the gifts that I was here to give. And it really just got to a point where I had enough. And I made the decision. I was one of the brave, brazen ones that just quit and then got into asking the question of, oh, okay, what am I going to actually do?
Yay, brave.
Yeah.
Hashtag brave. Hashtag no groceries.
Exactly. And the kicker was that 1 month after I started that journey, I was diagnosed with cancer. So it was one of those moments where I asked the universe. I thought, okay, I'm making the moves. I'm doing I'm going toward the direction of the things that I'm passionate about. And now this, what's happening here? What's going on? Why is this here for me? And I learned why that was here for me over time. So I'll back up a little bit to talk about what it is I'm doing now and why I got into this. So my journey starts as a kid where I grew up in a household that there was lots of love in this household, and there was a lot of division and fighting and poor communication and addiction. And the core message for me was it's better for you as a girl to be seen, not heard. So I know I'm not the only one that has that story, but for me, what that did was I created survival mechanisms as we do when we're kids. And I showed up in all sorts of spaces, holding in my voice, not communicating my needs. I hated raising my hand in class. I never asked questions. I was fascinated by people that could stand up and ask a question. I was like, what? And that it showed up in all sorts of interesting ways in my life. I thought I was just shy, and then I thought I was just a feisty Italian because what I would do was I would hold in my voice, not say anything, so especially in my intimate partner relationships. Resentment would build up, and then one day I would explode and I would leave the relationship or just cause all sorts of unnecessary arguments. And that was not okay with me at a certain point. There was a year where my father died. I was leaving another relationship in the same pattern. And I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. And so that was my journey inward, where I started to ask myself, oh, wait, like, what do I have to do with all of these situations I keep creating? And I started to deepen my understanding of what are my emotions, where do they come from, and really take responsibility for what I was creating in the world, which was the first time I had done that. I was always like, you need to change. You're at fault, all of those things, because that was what was demonstrated to me as a kid. So that's one piece of it. The second
let's
piece
let's
is,
just
oh,
let's
yeah,
unpack that a little bit,
yeah,
Amelia, because I think that's really
yeah.
powerful, and I don't want to just skip by that because
Okay.
it's super hard. Like, I mean, a lot of us, I mean, we've heard, your movements, your decisions are based on pleasure and pain. First of all, what a double whammy to get hit with a medical condition after you take probably one of the biggest leaps in your life. I mean, like that doesn't feel like a backslap, right? Like that doesn't. So congratulations for being able to maneuver whatever and however you did that. And so, but the other thing about taking responsibility for kind of where we are, it's very interesting, right? That's a very duo statement. Some people are like, that doesn't make sense to me at all. Some people are like, oh man, that totally makes sense to me. And I've delved it and I've gone and I've done my work and I've done my therapy. And I think, I always say, like, if you have that cycle going on in your life, you can usually see it show up because you have the similar feelings. But when you talk about the pain of seeing that repetitive pattern, what did you do? Because it's one thing to go, I took responsibility. I'm thinking there probably was a little bit of a process between, having the reality like, okay, Peter, Joe, George, and Chris are all leaving in the same, and Wow, I think I need to take a look at that. Was there something that was pinnacle or that you did? Because what a great tip for people that are like, okay, I might see that I've got this going on in my business. Like maybe it's like I'm on my fifth boss that I think's a jerk, or you know what, I keep having the same fight with each teenager as they get to the teenage stage, or something really triggers me. What was your process there that made you go, hey, I'm going to take a look at this? Because obviously it was showing up in your relationships, but it was also playing out in other areas of your life, because pain is pain, right? So what did you do without, without going into a whole show of, your personal process, but maybe you can just kind of give a little tip there to people.
Yeah, great question. I think you have to do one of the most courageous things possible, and that's just to pause and start
Mm,
to become aware of your life. Most people aren't doing that. We are just on the go, 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 go. That's the culture, the society that we have all around us. And we're encouraged not to pause, right? We've got all these streaming networks. We've got all sorts of alcohol and drugs that we can busy ourselves with. We've got work. We can dive into that. And it is socially accepted to do that. And so you really have to challenge the status quo and and make the pause. And when I did that, that's when my eyes opened up to say, oh, wait a second, I'm in this same situation again. And um, I also got really clear in that moment that I was lonely. I didn't have
mm,
any intimacy in my life because I had this big shield built up all around me to protect myself. And that just kept pushing people away. Sometimes it was through anger, sometimes it was through withdrawing. Um, and it just literally didn't feel good anymore. And I knew it was sort of like that intuitive sense. I was being drawn toward something else, but I stopped and I paid attention to it. So that was step one. And then the journey continued from there. I actually Googled, how do I trust my intuition? Because I was so in conflict with leaving this partner and what do I do? And I know I had had these feelings in the past, but ignored them. And I didn't want to keep doing that. And then that really started me on a journey. I worked with Gary Zukav for many years, where he was really teaching us about courageously looking inward and
mm.
taking radical responsibility for everything that you experience in your life.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think it was a great place to kind of just take a breather and give that kind of first tip. And interestingly enough, that's really communicating with yourself, which you are a master communicator, and you talk about listening. And I think how interesting that you had this listening experience. And I think you're right that pausing can be very difficult, because first of all, we're in a, in particularly in North America where we hang out, there is a production movement, but there's also a take care of yourself movement. And I don't think people really know how to put those together, or we're just starting to learn how to put those together, right? On self-care, self-love. But what does that look like? And yeah. Okay. Anyways, go on. Let's hear the rest of your story.
Okay. So during this time, the work that I was doing in the world was as a community engagement facilitator. So I worked a lot in rural, remote, indigenous communities across Turtle Island, that's North America, from the Arctic to the south, and then overseas as well, Africa, Mongolia, and India. And all of this time, I was listening to people's stories. And what I observed in those moments was that the way in which we gathered people together really mattered. So sometimes people would leave after a conversation feeling more divided from their neighbors, and other times people would have greater understanding, deeper connection with each other. And there's something about that that just stuck for me. So I decided to leave my business. I knew I did want to do community engagement because that was really what I had the most experience in. And so when I started Hum Consulting, which is my company, I wanted to be a community engagement specialist that really focused on, if we're going to bring people together to inform decisions, let's make it an opportunity for people to connect with one another. But what I realized was the ways in which we were gathering traditionally, like open houses or town hall meetings, those were not spaces for people to really hear one another and understand and deepen their connection. And so that's what Hum became about. I did lots of training in circle dialogue. And of course, a lot of the indigenous communities that I worked with, we were sitting in circle. And it was in particular those moments where I was like, oh, something is happening here where there's an energy or a, some sort of mysticism going on where people are able to hear each other in a different way. And so that's really what I'm an advocate for right now. It doesn't matter what setting I show up in. I use circle. We sit in chairs around a circle. There's no table in front of us where people are sharing their stories one by one. There's no interruption. There's no advice giving. There's no um, uh, getting in people's way. It's just creating space for everybody to share a full, complete thought from their heart. And it is amazing what happens in that space.
I'm so with you. I mean, I obviously have a strong background in holistic health, and in my massage studio, at one point I had 18 staff, and we would all, I mean, first of all, we were healers. And so that was, that bypassed some of it because we're all meditating daily and what have you. But our staff meetings were always in circle. Our staff meetings were always in circle. Now I've done circle and potlatches and stuff like that, but it just made sense, right? It just made sense that you would kind of sit in a community space that way because there's no hierarchy, right? There's no hierarchy. There's no one at the head of the table and someone at the other head of like who's going to sit at the other head of the table and who's going to sit to the left and to the right. But it does really make a difference. It was a lot of communication, and then just having people not talk until someone was finished, and then actually asking permission, like, hey, I have an idea on that. And, and having that, person nod or what have you. And honestly, I had my business for 27 years. And it was in 27 years, only 4 people needed to leave the business, due to certain situations or what have you. But we just didn't have staff turnover. I just didn't have staff turnover. It made hiring a lot easier as well. We brought someone in. It was almost like they came into the first meeting and everyone was like, yeah, this person's kind of cool. And
yeah,
but
I love that.
So yeah.
I think it's important for businesses and entrepreneurs today to really think about what you just said, because employees today are looking for more meaning in their workplaces. They're looking to make a contribution, to have it be more than just showing up and leaving. And yet so many of the meeting spaces are still, we're only hearing from a couple people in those spaces. And so what would it be like if everybody showed up and they knew that they were actually going to be able to contribute to what is being done, how things are being done in a place, and it can and does lead to more retention, like you've just shared. That's amazing. 27 years, only 4 people. That's unheard of. This is what's possible for all organizations.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So look, as you're talking, and I have this thing about, I can hear the questions of people that are listening. So there's people out there that are like, never even heard of that job. What does that look like? You've gone into really what people would consider a unique platform. So you've mentioned prior, there's obviously corporate and businesses and groups and communities and profits and nonprofits that can obviously benefit from your information. But for the individual entrepreneur out there who's solopreneuring it, there's lots of us, side gig, world hustle. How do they take what you're saying and be able to have better communication with who they're working with? I mean, imagine that this is some of the stuff clients would come to you. And I mean, your next question is obviously who comes to you and why and what can you do for them? But what are some things that we can walk away with if we are a solopreneur, not working in community, that will bring betterment to not only the people that we're dealing with, and they're like, wow, that was a great experience I had with Ame-Lia on the phone talking about, whatever it is, a website. And how can we incorporate that a little bit? Do you have some tips for us there?
Yeah. I think step 1 is getting clear on what do you want to contribute to the world? How do you want to show up? It's not a question many people ask, because I think we've put a lot of power in other people's hands in terms of how it is we experience the world and what's possible. But when we can take that back into ourselves, so any entrepreneur listening saying, how is it that I want to be in this world? What do I want to contribute to? Is it more peace? Is it more love? Is it more connection? Is it more collaboration? And having that moment with yourself to be like, okay, well, what would that look like? How would I be in that circumstance? And before any interaction, it's tapping back into that commitment and then setting your intention for, so many times we walk into conversations where we've got piles of data and we're ready to prove our point, or we're coming in ready to share our wisdom, our knowledge. That creates a certain kind of dynamic, and it shuts our ears down a little bit in terms of like we're not really stepping in to be listening to the other person. But when we can set our intention to connect or to deeply understand the other person, especially when there's tension or differences of opinion, it changes everything, because all of a sudden you're landing in that conversation with curiosity, and you are going to ask more questions versus be so focused on sharing whatever it is that you wanted to say. And that will allow that person to be seen and heard. And what that does for them is it relaxes their nervous system. So you become a little bit more trusting to hang around, so they can relax and maybe put a bit of their guard down. And then maybe your opinion relaxes as well. And it shifts because you've actually heard what that other person is saying underneath the strong position that they might have come forward with. If we can show up with each other in that way, it doesn't matter if you're talking to a supplier, to a colleague, to one of your staff, you're going to create this energy that brings you closer together with that individual.
That's awesome. That's really that's that's fantastic. I think that and you can also do it, like I can hear people go like, oh my gosh, my phone conversation is going to go from a half an hour to an hour. What is it? But I think you can really give that sense, and you can probably do it fairly quickly in the introduction, even if it's like, just allowing that. And that's a great skill to practice. So before you go into the kind of people that, because you've shared so much of this, we'll actually do that, share with us who are coming to you for their services, and kind of what is that? And then I have a question that's a little off topic that I think is going to be kind of cool for you.
Okay, I love it.
As she says with trepidatious, did I just
Yeah,
take you out of the loving and knowing and feeling safe?
I'm open. I'm accepting. Yeah, so who's coming to me? I mean, I work with a lot of governments and communities, nonprofit organizations that really they generally have. So I have a lot of experience working with and amongst Indigenous communities, and that's certainly a focus here in British Columbia, to really ask ourselves, what is reconciliation? How do we even have these conversations with Indigenous communities? And so often when I come in is when there's that opportunity for non-Indigenous and Indigenous organizations to partner with each other in some way. And they need that neutral party to sit there and be able to host the conversation where everybody can feel safe to be where they're at in that journey and express themselves, and really work forward together in this new world we're living in, because nobody knows the steps forward in the world of reconciliation. And I would say nobody knows the steps forward in many things in our world right now, because things are changing so quickly. So that's who's coming to me right now. I also have a particular focus on supporting change makers. So people like you that are out there in the world pushing the boundaries, looking at the internal structures in their systems and identifying where the systemic racism is, or identifying where power structures are that are no longer serving our world or those organizations. I create spaces for those folks to come together, to be seen, to be heard, to share what is in their heart, and to really chart a new path forward together by embodying new ways of being that aren't, you know, the ways of being that we've all brought up in. I'm passionate about that because I don't think the leaders have those spaces in their organizations to just like take their armor off and show up and be like, okay, I don't know the next step. And I'm balancing all these things and there's no space for me to chat about all this. So my 12-week program that I'm just launching is creating that space for those gladiators is what I call. And then there's a 5-day retreat as well that we're going to just deepen that work together.
Ooh, I love the word retreat. Whenever I hear retreat, I feel spa-like. Okay.
Yeah, this will not be spa-like.
This will not be spa. This will be like getting it done. But I so appreciate that. I so appreciate everything that you've shared. I think it gives food for thought. Yeah, it gives really food for thought. Even for me, I was like, hey, you know what? I think that there's some things that I could do shifting a little differently. And there's some people I'd love to recommend you to go into their business. But that's another conversation to be had. The question that I have for you is in this getting to know people, and I've been doing this podcast for a long time. I think last year we did, I don't know, well over 100 shows, and it's super cool because I get to know people. You know, I get to know people before and after, and we've been able to play in business and colleague prior to you coming on the show. And so I get to like when people are like, so you have to go to work. I'm like, no, I get to go to work. It's
Yes.
freaking cool what I get to do. But I always find it when you're talking about that, getting to know people, what, you know, that other side of what they do for a living. Tell us something about you we don't know. Let us get to know you a little bit. Tell us something we don't know and not to do with business.
Okay. I love it. Well, I don't want to say recovering, maybe a recovering competitive athlete. I'm a recovering triathlete. And so for anybody who knows triathletes, they can tend to be pretty intense. So that's what I was doing. Athletics was huge for me. It's why I went into my first degree, which was kinesiology. And I became a triathlete and actually won national championships and ended up training with the national team here in Victoria for a little bit. That was a cool chapter of my life. I loved the community. I loved pushing myself and really just the mental strength that I gained from that has supported me a ton in my entrepreneurship journey because as you know it's easy to get carried away in our head and it's not an easy journey. Every day is new and you really have to be kind of on your game to keep taking those steps forward. So I attribute a lot of my success today to that history and also the coaches that I had back then that supported me in my mindset.
Wow, that's very cool. I just think it's so interesting when you get to hear different things by different people. So look, I know we got to wrap up soon. I do want to mention, and I did mention that you have a podcast. So maybe you can share with people the name of that podcast. And look, I believe Ame-Lia's got some spots that for the first quarter in her podcast here. So if you're the kind of person that likes to share, you can contact her. And if you're like the kind of person that likes to listen, you can listen to her shows. But if you can share that with people and where they can reach you, and then I'm going to finale us with another yet amazing, exciting question.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, the podcast is called Circle of Change, and you can find it on all the podcast channels. I'm gathering together change makers and that can be anybody who really wants to contribute to making the world a better place. We come together in dialogue. I create that circle atmosphere and we talk about what it means to be the change in all sorts of ways. We bring on amazing guests who are being the change in their communities. So people tend to leave inspired with great ideas and also challenged in their habitual thinking patterns and ways of being because we kind of want to illuminate that for folks. So it's an awesome experience. I started it 2 years ago and yeah, it's changed my life for sure. So humconsulting.ca/podcast is where you'll find that. And then just humconsulting.ca is where you'll find my website. You can sign up for my newsletter and join me there for a monthly dose of inspiration and tips on how to have connecting conversations.
Awesome. I love that. Connecting conversations. Hashtag connecting conversations. I think that next time we get together and we all have our t-shirts, that should be yours. There you go. There's a free business tip. Okay, look, you guys, I know we got to wrap up. And I want to share a few things with you before we ask this final incredible question. And Ame-Lia, we're going to get you to stay on even after that question, because we're going to talk about, look, so I just want to share it because Ame-Lia has just talked about communication and being brave and being courageous. And you guys know, and there is an opportunity still for you to be that. If you are a woman in business, Mission Accepted is sponsoring and hosting the largest, and we're saying boldest, International Women's Day event that's going from March 2023 to May 2024. So we're covering 2 International Women's Day, 2 Mother's Day. And yes, of course, if you're a guy, you can come listen. I mean, we're expecting about 20% of all our audience to be you amazing men that are supporting these amazing women. And they're speaking up and standing up and showing up, all about gumption in relationship to projects, passion projects, business, tips, all of it, stories, history, legacy. So please, if you want a free ticket to that, you know where to reach me. And if you are the person that likes to speak up and you've bypassed some of the fear that both me and Ame-Lia went through and being that person to stick their hand up and you have something to say, we want to hear it. So you know where to reach out. And on that note, I'm going to ask you, Ame-Lia, if you're on your way to a desert island, your desert retreat, but it's only you're the only person that signed up, and you're packing your suitcase and you're putting in your album, that one album that you could not imagine not listening to for the rest of your life. And it can't be a greatest hits and it can't be a soundtrack. It's got to be an album. You don't have to list the song, but what album would it be?
Well, I was going to say Journey's greatest hits. Like,
we'll take that one. We'll take Can't Stop Believing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, Journey's greatest hits. Because really, I don't, when I think about Journey, I think we all think of their greatest hits, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great song. That's a great theme song for you. Well, there you go. I just gave that to you. Okay, you guys, you know what to do. You know to share this episode, to reach out. If you want me, it's not difficult. It's deb@debdrummond.com. This is very easy. If you want to be on the show, we have spots for you on the show. 2023 is starting to fill. Can you believe it? It's like not even starting in the playground, but we've got spots. So you guys know if you want to share where to come. And Ame-Lia, thank you so much for sharing today. I learned things. I'm sure the audience learned things in your episode. Please, you guys, do what you need to do and share this episode to anyone you think that needs to hear it. Any last words before we say goodbye?
Just much gratitude to you, Deb, for the work that you're doing. I think it's so important to have a leader like you helping entrepreneurs really step into their best lives and making their best impact. So, yeah.
Aw. Well, yeah, you get to come back now.
Oh, good. I said the right thing.
You said the right thing. Okay, you amazing audience. You go be you. And now you know how to listen better and communicate better. I'm expecting to hear lots of reports of just try it. Just try it. You know what? Just ask somebody, instead of saying, how was your day? Just say, is there something you want to share? Those kind of things, right? Just go, hey. So anyways, keep us posted. Thank you, Ame-Lia, for being on the show. And with that, you guys, we will see you on the next episode of Mission Accepted.